What's up YouTube, Jam Comics here. I have painstakingly spent the last few weeks playing through the career mode of Punch-Out Wii. The game is still fun to this day, even if the graphics haven't aged all too well. The motion controls do get on my nerves, but the option of a motionless control scheme made it way more bearable than it could have been. When I beat the game, finally, beating both the main career and title defense mode, I was left to wonder what's next for the Punch-Out franchise. While Punch-Out NES and Super Punch-Out are on Switch, the Wii version has not made the conversion yet, so no Punch-Out game is available on Switch for purchase. Nintendo could of course just port the Wii game in HD, a move I believe they should and probably will do if they're adding a new Punch-Out to Switch, but they could also create a full-on sequel. It would allow for a different type of Nintendo first-party installment on the system, being a Dark Souls / Rhythm / sports game. Here's my pitch for a Punch-Out 2, aka Punch-Out 4, technically, aka Punch-Out Switch. But before we start, remember to like, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on Punch-Out Wii, if you've played it. Without further ado, let's get right to it. Before we get into the details, the meat and potatoes, let's talk about the game's overview. While Nintendo could title it Punch-Out 2 or Punch-Out 4 to make the game more approachable, I believe they would use a subtitle for the game. The subtitle that makes the most sense to me is Punch-Out World Tour, since the games involve fighting against boxers from other countries. Another name would be Knockdown, because that's also a boxing term, but I still think World Tour is a better option here and it sounds more original than Knockdown. It is kinda named after a Trolls movie though, let's just ignore that fact. The game would most likely cost $60, but there is a slight chance that it could cost $50 like WarioWare Get It Together, since it is something Nintendo might consider a smaller release. The game's box art could, in this hypothetical discussion, feature Little Mac holding a champion's belt overhead, with a fighter on each side and random boxing gloves sticking out of the sides from other different fighters. The game's logo would be featured at the top of the box, like most Switch games. With the overview out of the way, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of the game. First of all of the modes from Punch-Out Wii will return: Career, Exhibition, and Local Head-to-Head. The new addition will be online play, which I will get to later, and which I believe that Nintendo would heavily market the game around, alongside the career mode. Of course, there will also be a gallery, but that's needless to say. The biggest difference here between this game and all of the previous ones is that all of the fighters will be playable this time around. Normally you can only play as Lil Mac or Wireframe Lil Mac, but in this game you can play as all of the fighters that you encounter. Whenever you defeat a boxer in career mode, you unlock them, and each fighter, including Little Mac, would have a different 3-star punch. For those who don't know, you get a star when you punch an opponent in a certain way with perfect timing. You can get up to 3 stars and hold down a button while punching, to Star Punch, which does more damage. Anywho, every fighter would have a different special 3-star punch, which, just like the Mario Tennis Aces specials, would have a unique cinematic and result in an instant strikeout. In multiplayer, these attacks can be countered with perfect timing. Little Mac's 3-star special would have him transform into Gigamac, like he does in the local multiplayer of Punch-Out Wii. In terms of the roster this time around, I believe that Nintendo should focus on completely new boxers. The roster of Punch-Out Wii was completely comprised of returning fighters, with Disco Kid and Donkey Kong as the only new characters. In this game, Little Mac and Doc Louis would obviously return, and I believe only 3 fighters from previous games should return. Glass Joe, since he is a staple of the series, King Hippo because of how unique and iconic his design is, and Don Flamenco because I personally like his design and personality. The rest of the cast would be new characters designed by Nintendo or Next Level Games, who would be developing it, allowing for other countries to have fighters representing them in the series. There were 14 fighters and 3 circuits in Punch-Out Wii, so I'm thinking that 4 circuits and around 18 fighters would be pretty reasonable for this installment. Some ideas I've had while brainstorming for fighters include a sumo wrestler from Japan, a fighter from Egypt using a scarab charm, sort of like Great Tiger and Wii, a Steve Irwin-esque type, RIP, you prince, from Australia, and a carnival dancer from Brazil. I don't know if Nintendo would introduce a female boxer, since Mac hasn't competed in co-ed leagues before, and there would probably be some controversy, so that is up to Nintendo to decide. It would give the game an appeal to both women and men since every fighter would be playable, but I'm not sure if it's worth the possible outrage, so Nintendo can decide. Side note though, there are female fighters in Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and ARMS, another Nintendo game, so I don't think the outrage would be too vitriolic if Nintendo were to add female boxers. Anywho, the final boxer of the game would also be from the United States of America, like Mr. Sandman was and Little Mac is, but I'm not quite sure what their design would be. Mr. Sandman could return, but I'd still like to see what Nintendo would come up with if they made an original final boss for this game. To finish off the roster, we could get 4 Nintendo guest characters in a secret circuit. Donkey Kong would obviously return with the same moveset as in Wii. Captain Falcon would be second and utilize his Falcon Punch. Bowser Jr. would be third with his clown car and his pucks and gloves that come out of it. And finally, Springman from ARMS will be the final boss of the secret end circuit, which would be unlocked after beating the title defense mode and watching the end credits for the second time. A big way that this game would differentiate itself from the other Punch-Out games would be its original arenas for each fighter. Each fighter's arena would obviously play into their stereotype. For example, Glass Joe's arena would be in the streets of Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the back and crowds all around watching the match holding things like baguettes and croissants. For the final boss, the fight would take place in the World Circuit Arena from Wii, or Smash Bros. And the end circuit would take place in an arena on top of a GameCube, like in Mario Kart Double Dash, with older Nintendo consoles on a shelf in the background and an all-black void all around. For career mode, each fight must take place on the opponent's stage, but in local and online multiplayer, any fighter can fight on any arena and they can be selected by the players. Unlike Punch-Out Wii, Mac's Last Stand would not be in this game, because it really rubbed me the wrong way on the Wii that after fighting all of the fighters once and then again in title defense, you could end up locking Champions mode if you couldn't defeat 10 random fighters on free tries. I think this time around, Champions mode could be unlocked after beating the end circuit, or it could just be unlocked right when you beat a fighter. Unlike in the older games, you can replay fights in career mode to get a higher score. Also, Mac's Last Stand would pretty much be replaced by the N Nintendo circuit. And the fighters would be selected by different world maps for each circuit that are posted up on a corkboard in Mac and Doc Lewis's gym. Exhibition mode would be the same as it was on Wii, with each fighter having 3 different challenges to complete. Unlike Wii though, there won't be any exhibition challenges for the title defense renditions of the fighters, only 3 challenges per fighter. Local head-to-head would function similar to how it did on the Wii. Online would function somewhat similarly to local, but with a ranking system. Like Splatoon 1 and 2, there would be different lettered tiers, with S being the best that you could work to level up your character to, each time you won an online match. During matchmaking, you could also practice in Mac's gym with a dummy or spar with Doc Lewis. There would be 2 separate modes for online. Head-to-head, where you would obviously fight against another player online with 1 fighter each, and tournament, where you would each pick 3 fighters and go up against each other, with the option of switching between fighters in the middle of the match. This online tournament would function similarly to a Marvel vs. Capcom fight. There would be a fresh take for the series. It could also be an option for local mode, but I think it should really be emphasized online. Another idea that I have is that after each match you get coins that you can spend to get free costumes for each fighter, with Mac being the exception, and having 6 costumes: his normal costume, his blue costume, his American flag costume, his champion costume, his wireframe costume, and his SNES brown-haired costume. This game would either be a late spring or early summer title, and Nintendo could constantly update it with returning fighters from the older games who weren't in the base game, and would be available for the local and online modes with exhibition challenges added for them as well. Nintendo would continue to support this game for about a year, until the roster capped around at about 26 boxers. The game would also have its own tournaments like Splatoon or Smash Bros. If Nintendo markets it right and it sells well. I'd personally estimate it sells around 2 to 3 million units, since the Wii game sold 1.14 million units. This game is almost certainly not happening anytime soon, and I truly believe the next time we see Punch-Out, it will be in the form of a Punch-Out Wii port. When, or more accurately if, Nintendo decides to create a new Punch-Out game, I hope that it aligns well with this outline, and even if it doesn't, I'll just be glad to see the series return. That being said, remember to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Punch-Out Wii down below. Jim Comics out.